Today I am talking to the wonderful Lucy Critchley. In this episode, Lucy kindly and openly shares her story around navigating grief whilst running a business and what she learned from losing her beautiful mum unexpectedly in March 2022. Before we start though, I want to tell you a little bit more about who Lucy is and what she does. Lucy is the founder of Untold Creative, a creative comms agency that offers podcast production, social media content creation and email marketing support. Prior to setting up her business, Lucy was a production coordinator in the TV and audio industries and has worked events like the Brits and the Arias and the Radio Industry Awards. Lucy lives in Leeds with her husband and her daughter. She loves cups of tea and the Gilmore Girls. This episode is so beautiful and I'm really thankful to Lucy for being so honest and vulnerable because I know it will help so many of you who are listening. Please do connect with me and share what you thought of the episode. I'd really love to hear. And whether you have followed me for a while or you're brand new here, I'm so grateful for you. Hey Lucy, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Hi Becky, thanks for having me.
So I did just want to say this is actually take 2 for us, isn't it? Because we recorded a brilliant episode, if I do say so myself, and then the recording didn't work. So I learned a lot, but I'm really excited because it means I get to chat to you again. And actually, since then, lots of stuff's happened, hasn't it? So we've sort of decided to take a little bit of a different angle with what we spoke about last time as well. But before we get into any of that, do you just want to tell everybody who's listening a bit about sort of who you are and what your story is? Like, did you always want to become a business owner? Like, was that always in your plans or did it happen by accident? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, thank you. So my story, I hadn't actually thought about, did I always want to be a business owner? But growing up, my mum, why did I say mum? I'm from the northeast, we say mum. My mum was, she was a seamstress and she sometimes worked in like alterations places and stuff. But she also did like lots of things from home. And as I think about it, she was kind of a bit of a freelancer. And I'd always had like jobs, like employed roles. Worked in TV and radio production. And then I had my daughter in December 2019. And obviously we all know that COVID hit. And I was freelance then, but it was like short-term fixed contracts and stuff. So I didn't really think that I was going to do anything other than go back to working in TV production until the pandemic arrived. And all my friends from the industry were like super stressed out, rightfully, naturally so, about like, what does this mean? What's going to happen? Obviously they can't go out and film things. So like what on earth is going to happen? Because we were all self-employed. And I obviously had a baby and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I'd sort of saved up I worked 2 jobs basically before I had her, so that I had enough money to go and have a maternity leave plus maternity allowance for a bit. But I couldn't really cope with sitting still when the lockdown happened, and I didn't really know what else I was gonna do. And then I found a virtual assistant on Instagram who is now my friend Holly, and she lives in the same town as me. And slightly before lockdown, I sort of made her be friends with me, befriended her, and we went for a cuppa. And I asked her all the questions, like, what do I need to do? How do I do it? What, like, do I need to do a course? Like, what's all this stuff? And because the work I used to do in TV and radio, it was kind of like, I felt like I could bring those skills to like business owners. And it just grew from there, really. And I wouldn't call myself a virtual assistant now. Started to introduce myself as an agency founder, which obviously as a podcast, you can't see the face I pulled when I said that, but I don't really know like how else to describe it. Now we make podcasts, social media content and email marketing campaigns for independent business owners. So I don't know, in the industry that I was in, being freelance was kind of like expected, I suppose, that you wouldn't get a staff job in a production company, really. You would probably be attached to a production, and it was easier for them that way. Less so for the person who was working on it. And then I just figured that's how it would be, rather than like I am now. I have like, you know, a group of clients really. But being a business owner and running my business is probably one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because there was so much that you said in there that I wanted to kind of respond to, because there's an episode with Helen Hill, who is in a community that we're both in and being freelance, coming out in a couple of weeks. And we were talking about, it was recorded the other day, she was talking about reluctantly stepping into the entrepreneur label. And we had a bit of a conversation around what you were saying about what you do call yourself.
Yeah.
And it made me think as well, because I've always sort of thought like, I don't know, like I guess freelancer, but that kind of implies that someone gives you work, you do the work for them, and you know, you're just not employed by them or whatever. And that's not what I'm doing anymore. And I was like, okay, so what am I? But it made me think as well, you saying about your mum, do you think that without even realizing, maybe influenced you a bit, that she was kind of a business owner? Because I realized the other day that technically both my mum and dad were business owners, and I've never considered that, literally up until it was a couple of weeks ago, because somebody said to me, oh, what did your mum and dad do? I was like, oh, well, my dad was a roofer. He was a self-employed roofer. And he was kind of a freelancer because he worked for a company, but he was self-employed. And my mum was a hairdresser. Well, as we got older, she went into a career in Marks and Spencer's, but whilst we were growing up, she was a hairdresser. And before we were born, she worked in a salon. Then she went self-employed. And I suddenly had this moment where I was like, oh my God, both my mum and my dad were business owners, and I'd never considered it. But it suddenly occurred to me that I was like, oh, so I don't think either of them particularly desired to be business owners, but what they did want was a life that fitted around their family, a life that was flexible, a life that was whatever. And I was like, oh, wow, that's exactly what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realised, like without realising, I was obviously influenced by that all through growing up. Do you think it did have a bit of a...
Yeah, and to be honest, I only really realised it a couple of months ago. I was in a workshop about communication and like how you sort of introduce yourself and how you communicate with other people. And the person who was hosting it said something about like family members, and I was like, oh my God. Yeah. But now I think about it, you know, like my mum, she had an illness throughout like my entire childhood and you know, the rest of my life, and she, I think, was a bit of a Del boy in it. You know, there was just like people in and out of the house. She was taking up curtains. She was making Holy Communion dresses. She was doing all kinds of stuff. Like, you need that, I'll sort you. Like that kind of vibe, which is definitely like mum all over. And I think there's some bits there that I've definitely taken into being a business owner, not the Del boy bit, but like the kind of like the friendly approach when she was chatting to people, and the way that she like made everyone feel really comfortable. Like, people would have to come into our house and like get changed into the clothes that they wanted altering or whatever. And my mum would be there, like, you know, wandering around them, trying to fit, you know, sort out how far up something needed to be taken up. What do you want doing with this? You know, whatever. Like, she had to make people feel really comfortable and stuff, and she did that really well.
But also probably the attitude, and I'd say the same with my mum and dad, really, that you do what you have to do to make it work. And really, that's probably how I fell into business. It was like, well, I've walked away from my career. I'm not really sure what to do, and I need to make something work for my family. And it took a while to suss out what that was. But yeah, it just, because my mum and dad, I think growing up, would have said, I'm a hairdresser, I'm a roofer. So the language of self-employed and business owner and all that kind of stuff I'd never heard. I never would have heard. I'm not even sure if, I mean, they would say they were self-employed now. But yeah, I think it is around the attitudes. For them, it was very much about giving us the life they wanted. And the same for your mum. Like, sounds like my mum and dad, like a hustler,
that's
like
her
they
all
would make
over.
it work. And I think it was more common back then, wasn't it, to be a bit Del boyish about it?
Yeah, she bloody loved it.
Yeah. I remember it with my mum and dad, though. We had an incredible childhood, but we were by no means well off. But they were like, right, we want to take you on holiday, so we're going to do what it takes to take you on holiday. And they'd fit in, like my mum would fit in more clients, and we'd go round to all the houses and go with her, like when we were at a certain age. So I love that, because like I said, I only realised that a couple of weeks ago. And my mum does listen to the podcast, so if you're listening to this, and a shout out to you, mum. My dad doesn't, so but I think that's really nice, and also probably leads quite nicely onto one of the reasons I was really gutted about losing our interview was because of what we were talking about. And you were very vulnerable in it as well, which was really, really lovely. But it was talking about your mum, wasn't it? So when you, or your mam, don't think I can get away with saying that.
No, don't worry. You don't have to say it. I do, but it would be wrong if I didn't. But you don't have to.
I've got a friend who says it, and you saying it just reminds me of her because it's the accent and everything. But anyway, but no, you were talking about your mum, wasn't you? And you was talking about the point in your business where you lost your mum, and that was one of the things that you sort of wanted. That's what you, when you applied for the podcast, was like, I kind of want to talk about, like, help anybody else that's going through sort of difficult stuff and how you dealt with it. So do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my mum, throughout my childhood, like I said, was unwell. She had Crohn's disease, and then that kind of, because it was the 90s, the medicine wasn't where it's at now, so she had to have a ton of operations and loads of treatment and things. Whereas, I have a friend who has Crohn's in 2024, and her treatment options are vastly different to what my mum had experienced. But she had, so it was manageable, let's put it that way. It was manageable for a long time, and then during the lockdown it must have been early-ish, like July time in the lockdown, she had to go on to this. She had this thing which was called a Hickman line, which gave her like nutrition. Because of all the operations, she didn't absorb nutrients and stuff in the way that she was supposed to. So she had this extra line fitted, and she had to go up to. We're from Middlesbrough, and she had to go up to Newcastle to go to one of the hospitals there to be like taught how to use it a few years before. And she was like, absolutely, I'm a doctor now. Knew exactly what to do. She was like super proud of herself. I loved it. And it got to a point where, I don't know if it was like lockdown related or what, but she got sent a contaminated batch of the nutrition, and it got recalled, so she didn't use it. And they said that we'll send you out some new stuff, but the new stuff didn't arrive, and it sent her into like a organ shutdown. So she was in hospital in ICU for weeks and weeks in the summer, that really hot summer of lockdown. And it left her with like kidney failure. So she had to go in and out of hospital. I mean, we thought that was going to be when we would say goodbye. We thought that was going to be it. But somehow, I don't know, she's like a spring. She would go into hospital, she would come back, and she'd be at home like putting the kettle on. And it was like, how on earth have you done this? Because so many other people would not have gotten through what she did. Anyway, she was home, and she was having her dialysis 3 times a week as a result of the kidney failure. And as we understand it, kidney failure can also cause heart problems because it puts a lot of strain on your heart. And in March 2022, she had a cardiac arrest at home and sadly passed away. That there and then, pretty much. It was very sudden. It was unexpected. But I think it would be wrong of me to say that it was a surprise. I don't know how that sounds, but
no, I get that.
She absolutely changed who she was from that big ICU moment, from that time. Like she suddenly looked old. She was only 55 when she died, so she wasn't an old parent, and I think it would be, I don't know how to say this without sounding really heartless, but I think we knew we didn't have that long.
Yeah, that's not heartless. That's not heartless at all.
And so when it happened, it was like 11 o'clock at night. My brother, who's quite a lot younger than me, he was 19 at the time, he rang me and told me that Mum had died. And I literally had just taken my glasses off to go to sleep. Like, it was that, like, I hadn't even been to sleep. And yeah, my brother called and he said, "You don't have to come back though." I was like, "Are you joking?" Like, getting dressed while I'm on the phone. Like, I've got to go. I've got to be there. So, and that was just it, you know, like my business at that point, I was a virtual assistant. And it was just like, I couldn't even think about how any of that stuff, you know, I just had to go, I just had to be there. And I just wanted to be there, you know. So I got ready and I drove home. I live in Leeds, so it was only about an hour and 20 minutes back home, but I feel like I did it in about 10 minutes. Like, I've never driven so fast in my entire life. And my best friend still lives in Middlesbrough, so I rang her on the way and I had to tell her, and I told her, and because my mum's house was small and I didn't even have a room to stay in when I'd come to visit, so I had to ring Vicky up and be like, "Can I stay at your house?" Like, it was such, I didn't even pack pajamas, like, I just had to go. Like, I didn't think about anything, I just had to go.
Yeah. And that's such a huge thing anyway. Like, that's like, it is one of the worst things I think anyone can go through. And I know people have all different relationships with their parents, but I think no matter what, it's the hardest thing. Well, I don't know, in touch wood, I'm very lucky I still have my mum and dad, but the thought of it honestly makes me want to vomit. So going through something like that is huge anyway, let alone when you had Edie at that point, didn't you? Have a small baby, you've got a business. It just being an adult, you're juggling all of that. And I love that you did. Well, obviously it's not funny, but like, your brother saying, "Oh, you don't need to come back," and it's like,
Honestly,
sorry,
what a thing to say. I was like, "Are you mad?" Like,
no, I get that, because obviously they don't want you to feel, like, obliged, do they, or guilty or anything like that. But
yeah.
being able to drop it and go, but how, like, without sounding, and I know this is one of the things you sort of wanted to talk about, because like you said, nothing of what you said sounded heartless. Like, there is, like, just genuinely, there are practical things you have to think about, aren't there? When stuff like that happens. Like, did you, at what point, like, in terms of your business stuff, how did you, I know you had a small team, didn't you? But how did you sort of manage the logistics of that to be able to drop it and go? But what did you need, in hindsight, what did you do and what did you need to think about to sort of cover the basics, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So when Mum died, those couple of days, all the responsibility, I'm sure if any of my family were to listen to this, they would hopefully agree, but all of the responsibility fell to me. Like, I organised the death certificate, I sorted out the funeral, I did all the arrangements, I sorted like everything. The kind of person I am, though, I wanted to do that, and I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it, let's put it that way, if the people had tried to help. I think I had it was never a discussion that we had in terms of like what she wanted, but I think I had an idea. And we all, as a family, talked about, like, this is, well, she would want to be buried, she would want this kind of coffin, we would want to do these kind of, like, we had that conversation. But then I was like, right, I've got to go and do this now. Like, sorting out all the insurances, and luckily it didn't have to like sort her house because her husband was still there, but all the other stuff was on me, really. So that, in hindsight, I look at this and I think I was clearly not thinking straight. But that night, when I got back to my friend's house in the early hours of the morning, I thought, I'm going to have to tell my clients, and I don't know how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? obviously all my clients were so incredibly like understanding and respectful, and no one got in touch in the time that I was away or anything like that. But what I did was I scheduled an email to a more palatable time in the day that explained that my mum had passed away and that I was going to be away from my desk for a bit, and if they needed anything, then I'd literally a month before taken on an associate. And I just was like, Caitlin will be here. So if you need anything, please get in touch with Caitlin. She was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. She just picked anything up that came up. And I said to her, you message me if you need anything. Whether I even look at my laptop is a different thing. I am the sort of person who loves to work. I love my job. I love what I get to do. And so, like, not taking my laptop if we go to visit family or we go for a weekend away, that's a big thing for me to not do that. And when my mum died, I couldn't even imagine looking at my emails. I couldn't even imagine opening my computer to even like put Netflix on or whatever. Like, I just couldn't even. The thought of it was just too much. It was absolutely too much. And so Caitlin just took everything on. And I also had a mentor at the time, and she was brilliant. And I think without the two of them, like, they had calls with my clients and explained like where I was at in terms of like if I was going to be coming back anytime soon, or like a lot of my clients were on retainer, so they kept them up to date with where the retainer was at. And I was very much like, let me pay you for your time, and they wouldn't accept any money. And like, it was all just, I couldn't have asked for a better team, really, a better group of people to have behind me. It made a real difference.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, because I guess like lots of people listening to this might not have people who actually work with them and, you know, and are paid and all that kind of stuff. But I also think from, well, the communities we're both in and separate communities that we're both in, I think it's about, it's times like that that you really realise the importance of the community around you, because, and the need to recognise, like, I love what you said about, like, you know, because I don't think there's any right or wrong way to deal with it, is there? It's like, if you, like, I hear some people that, you know, have lost a parent and then the following day gone back to work, and that's fine, because sometimes that's what people need. Or I know people that have lost a parent, or even not necessarily a parent, but have gone through something and have needed like X amount of time off work. And there's no, I think the important thing that stands out to me is there's no right or wrong way to do it. And even if, and it's about having that community around you and asking for help. So if you don't have a team, I don't know whether you'd agree with this, but if you don't have a team, I think there's 2 or 3 people I could reach out to and say, I'm putting this out of office on my emails. Can you check it once a day? And if anything comes through that I absolutely need to know about, and it needs to be like a need to know about, pass it on to me. And obviously, you know, they're busy people. They're not going to want to do that for a long time, but it gives you some grace, doesn't it? Of like,
Yeah.
it's that importance of asking for help. And that's brilliant if you've got a team and you can do it like that. But I think even if you haven't, I know from the communities that I've built around myself that there's people that you could go to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I took a month off at the time. She passed away on the 7th of March, and I was back sort of 10th of April, I think it was. But then for me, that was my like, right, now I need to actually earn some money now because I'm self-employed and no one's going to pay me because I've taken some time off, like, rightly, you know, for me, it was right to take time off. And then in the September, my brother went to uni, and I would have done this anyway if my mum had been alive, but I dropped him off and I took him down. He's at uni in Guildford, which from Middlesbrough to Leeds to Guildford is quite a trek. When I dropped him off, that hit me like a ton of bricks as well. So that was another moment where I needed to take some extra time off, more than I had expected that I would, you know. And I remember saying to him, I'm so proud of you. And he was like, will you just stop? Like, but I really was, and I still am, you know, like I think what he's done, having dealt with, you know, he had to call the police, he had to call the ambulance, he had to get all the stuff sorted before any family were there. And he had to tell everybody. And now he's like finishing his second year of uni, and I'm like such proud big sister. But he hates it every time I say that I'm proud. So if it listens, well,
I'll snippet this bit and make sure you can send it to him.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll send it to him. He'll hate it and love it, I think.
I think that's really important what you said there, because there's an element of like, you go back to work, but actually it doesn't mean that like, right, I'm back at work, I'm fine, I'm just going to crack on again. Like you said, there's going to be like first anniversaries or big life moments or just bad days, like where everything feels a bit worse. How did you find, because also you can be sort of physically in your business but not necessarily completely mentally there and all of that kind of stuff, but also, you know, we know as business owners, and this is what this podcast is all about, is showing up. Like, how did you find showing up in your business, whether that be on social media or you know, like networking events, anything like that? Did you like, how did you deal with that? Did you take more of an extended break from that, or did you take it as it comes? Or
I've always been quite an open person, so I'm really, you know, if people ask me something, I'm going to tell them as much as I feel like I want to in that moment. You know, like I've always been the person when I had employed roles, if we were talking about salaries, I'd be like, this is what I'm getting. Like, I'm not going to keep any of that to myself, you know. Share and share alike, right? We can't all collaborate and make it fair if I'm not going to tell you what I'm on, you know. Which is not, it's, you know, it's landed me in hot water a few times, let's put it that way. But I was very happy chatting to clients on Zoom calls and in one-to-one situations, but generally when it comes to networking events, I was a bit rubbish at going to them anyway. So the thought of being in a room with loads of people and not knowing if I was going to get upset or how I was going to feel that day just filled me with dread. So I didn't bother really. And one of the things I suppose of starting my business in lockdown is that I never really went to many in-person networking things anyway, because it just wasn't a thing. But on those days where I just didn't feel right, then I would be honest with my clients. You know, I might be sat at my desk working, but I would maybe like reschedule a meeting if I didn't feel like I was in the right frame of mind to have those conversations. And I think the thing with grief is that you just don't know when it's gonna land. You know, some days I would wake up and at the beginning and I would feel like okay, and I would, you know, like be very happy to get working and get to my desk and stuff. And then in the afternoon I'd be like, oh my god, like where's this come from? It would just absolutely land on me. But it really is a wave, and if it's taught me anything, it's just taught me to like look after myself a bit more and be kinder to myself, because I think only till possibly quite recently I've thought that I maybe treat my business like I'm employed, and that like this is my working day, so therefore I will be at my desk from 9 till 5 or whatever. And if anything, like the fact that my mum's not here and the fact that things are different now should teach me to like enjoy myself a bit more. And it's not something that I'd really like clocked until fairly recently, I think. And I want to enjoy my business and stuff more, you know.
Because going back to what we said earlier about, you know, like, and I know you're very similar, you're doing it for the life you want to create rather than, I mean, you know, we all do it for money, but the life you want to create as well. And I think so, and I know this isn't anywhere near on the same scale, but I lost my nan recently, and I found like a lot of that. And one of the things that I was thinking about recently, and like I said, it's not on the same scale. She was 89. It was a very happy release. It was all of those things, but it was still, I can't swear, but it was still very rubbish. And it hit me much harder than I was expecting it to, actually, because I almost felt like I'd grieved her already because she had dementia and she hadn't known who I was for a long time and whatever. But it hit me a lot harder than I thought. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about recently was something I've seen on social media at some point in the past, but was around, if you only have 40% to give and you give 40%, you've given 100%.
Yeah.
So I was saying to my friend yesterday, I was like, I wake up a bit like you were just saying, I wake up every morning, I'm like, oh yeah, I feel all right. No, I'm good. And I go on and I go onto Instagram and I do my live and I do my thing and I do whatever. I get to about 3-4 o'clock and I hate everyone and everything. Like, it's just, and it probably is grief. Like, maybe I haven't even noticed that it's grief, or it's, like a whole lot of other things that are going on. And I was saying to her yesterday, I feel like I need to start stopping work at 2 o'clock so I have an hour before I have to go and get the kids from school, because at the moment I'm getting the kids from school at the point I turn into this. Like, and it's thinking about things like that, isn't it? It's like, whatever it is that you're, and however you react to things, if you're having a really hard time, like you said, you need to be kind to yourself and recognize, especially if you're working for yourself, if I want to stop at 2, I can. And if it means I maybe have to work a couple of hours in the evening, which I've done a lot this week, then I can. And that's okay, because we've got that flexibility around us. And it's not great because it means I don't finish till whatever time at night, but it's, you take what you need when you need it. And I think you're right. That's really, really important.
It is really important. And I think you can't be the best version of yourself if you feel rubbish. And the thing I found, and it does obviously manifest itself very differently in everybody, but I went through a stage of being really angry, even though, similar to your nan, we knew that Mum, it wasn't like she's got 6 months left, or it wasn't that kind of thing, but it was like, you don't look like Mum anymore. You're not. She was despite being unwell, she was a very active person. She was always up and, doing things for other people, always thinking of other people. And then I suppose towards the end, she just looked absolutely exhausted. And I think throughout my life, you sort of, I don't know if I would call it grieving necessarily, but you're very aware, I think, that with the amount of hospital visits and the amount of operations and things, a small amount of people get out of that and are fine, right? It was kind of, it was coming, I suppose, and you sort of reconcile in your head that or maybe I reconciled in my head that she probably wasn't gonna see 60, that sort of thing. But she always said, this is very old-fashioned viewpoint, but she always said she wanted to see me get married and have a child, and she wanted to see my brother go to uni. And she saw me get married and have a child, and she saw my brother get into uni. And so those things for her were ticked off her list, she was happy. And I don't know if this is an overshare, but I will tell you anyway.
Go for it.
From seeing my mum look very in pain and very uncomfortable, when she died, she was in a chapel of rest, and I've never seen her look more peaceful, So for me, as horrible as it is that she's not here, I can take a bit of comfort in the fact that she's not hurting anymore, and she doesn't have to faff about with making sure she's got all the right treatment and that she's being looked after properly and advocating for herself in the hospital and stuff. So
it's a funny thing though, isn't it? Because I think as well, and I don't, I'm by no means comparing the two things, because they're very different things, in terms of your nan and your mum and all that kind of stuff. But it is also, like, don't try and rationalize grief.
Mm.
Because I even did that with my nan. I was like, well, she was 89 and she was, and it doesn't stop it being rubbish. And it's
No.
like you were saying about, you're practical, you sort of know it's coming, but that doesn't change it. And I remember saying to my husband,
No,
like I
it
said, it
doesn't.
hit me a lot harder than I thought it was going to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was saying to him, this is ridiculous, because we'd nearly lost my nan 2 years prior, and I'd flown 300 miles down south. Well, I didn't actually fly, like we'd sped 300 miles down south to get there to say goodbye. And a bit like you were saying about your mum, she was a warrior, my nan, and lived for another 2 years. But a bit like, she was never the same again. She had a fall shortly afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
She was then bedbound for a very long time. And it was almost like in those 2 years, every time I went back down south, I said goodbye.
Yeah.
And I was sort of preparing myself. And so I was saying to myself, well, it's ridiculous, because I knew it was coming and it's a happy release for her. And I've said goodbye so many times. And he was like, but it's not ridiculous. He was like, you loved her for 40 years,
Yeah.
So I think, without going sort of too deep on it all, it's like, I think sometimes when you're in points like that in life, even if you're not dealing with business and other stuff, you try and rationalize it, and you try and tell yourself you should respond in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
or you should do this, that, or the other. And I think it's just really important it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of what you're doing. So, in the example of my nan, it's like, well, some people might look at that and go, well, in fact, when we lost my other nan, quite a long time ago, I remember someone saying to me, well, and I actually said something along the lines of, well, it was only your nan. Like, and she wasn't that old at the time, because it was like 18 years ago. But people have different relationships, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said about parents, but it's like you talking about your experience. I just think it's important we talk about it, because no one has to
Yeah.
respond in the same way. No one
No.
has to take time off work or not take time off work and all that kind of stuff. But it's about just recognizing what you need, isn't it? And
Yeah.
if that is taking a long time off, if it is doing a couple of hours a day, if it is whatever, just being really kind to yourself about that.
That's it. And I think being kind to yourself is definitely one thing. And also having clients that get it and that aren't
Yes.
going to
Yeah.
say, I don't know, the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I have a business owner friend who lost her dad, and one of her clients, she wanted to carry on working. She didn't take time off. And a business owner and her client, sorry, was asking her, like, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? She's like, well, my dad's just died. Like,
Yeah.
give me
I'm not
give me a
laughing here,
break. I'm
mate.
not. It's just like, what on earth? Read the room. And I felt so lucky and super grateful that my clients that I had at the time, some I still work with now, like, were so kind and so thoughtful. I had flowers for days in my house, lots of lovely gifts and thoughtful cards, and it made such a difference to know that I wasn't just like a person to work with, that
Yeah.
there was like a deeper relationship there, and that they understood and that they got it. And there's, like I say, so many people out there who haven't had that.
Yeah.
And I feel really lucky that my clients really respected
Yeah.
what I needed.
Yeah. And I think as well, for, I don't know, like if anyone's listening, if you are in that position and you're, and I do hate the word lucky. I say that a lot, because I think in a lot of ways, like, you've chosen clients,
Mm.
haven't you, that are good people. But that doesn't mean, like, if you're in that position where you don't get that, that doesn't make them right. And it's okay. Like, you don't owe them. I mean,
Yeah.
like, you might have to, like, some work that you need to get done or whatever. But also, I think me in that instance, that would be a huge red flag for me, that I'd go, no, this client relationship needs to end.
Yeah.
Because so I think it helps you realize who you do and don't want to work with as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, massively. And life is, it's a cliche, but life is too short to work with people who make you miserable. And
Yeah.
if losing mum has taught me a lot of things, really, but one of the things is to listen to my gut more, and to put myself out of my comfort zone a little bit more, I suppose, and do those things that maybe make me feel a bit scared. And by having sort of experienced that, I think has given me a bit of a, like, does this make me happy? Am I in the right place with the right clients? And if the answer's no, then that's something I need to look at.
Yes, I love that. I really love that. And am I right in thinking you did share publicly about it on your socials, didn't you? Like you put a
Yeah.
post out to say what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find that? Is that something you wanted to do, or did you feel a bit unsure about whether to do it?
Yeah. Do you know, I didn't think twice at the time. I just did it because I felt like I'm quite active on social media, and if I just disappeared, I think
Yeah.
people might be like, well, where's she gone? They
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have been. They probably would not have cared. But I just felt like it was something, when it's so raw, I wanted to share how I felt, I suppose.
Yeah.
And yeah, I posted about it on my social media, and I got such lovely responses from my friends and clients and people that I've met along the way, that it just, like, if anything, it sort of solidified I'm in the right business, you know, I've got
Yeah.
the right people around me,
Yeah.
which I just think when I was working in TV and radio and stuff, you'd be all over the, different production
Yeah.
companies, different businesses, and I definitely made friends, people I still talk to now, but I think the freelancer community is so different in that
Yeah.
respect, you
Yeah.
know.
And I think a little bit about what we said earlier as well. That's where sort of, because it's hard to ask for help when you're,
Mhm.
in a dark place or not in a very good place. And that's where you get the offers of help as well. When we were saying about if you haven't got a team around you,
Yeah.
like there are so many people out there when you've built communities, which doesn't even have to be physically being part of a community, but like you said, like
No,
on your
no.
socials or wherever.
Yeah.
I think stuff like that always reminds me how many good people there are in the world, because you can easily look at it and think the world's a terrible place, but actually this is all very love actually, but there are more good people than bad in the world, aren't
Yeah.
there?
Love really is all around.
Yes. Stuff like that really shows it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
it
it's
does.
comforting.
Yeah. Yeah, massively comforting.
Yeah.
And so many people got in touch and said, when I lost this person in my life, or, this happened to me, not even necessarily like a grief situation. Even one of my friends had her second child, and that changed her whole business around. She had to get
Yeah.
someone to cover for her. And so there are so many different things that could happen, positive and
Yeah.
negative. And having that community around you to rally around you when you need it, that bit of support,
Yeah.
is just so invaluable.
Yeah. And I think it's normalizing, isn't it? That like social media is always going to be a highlight reel, because even when people are sharing real life stuff, it's still a snapshot of it.
Mhm.
But it's normalizing that life is tough and everybody's going through something, whatever that might be. And like you said, not even necessarily grief, even and we've been talking about it, but like, at points in the school year, or when
Yeah.
parenting gets hard or whatever it is, and someone just going to you, yeah, no, I feel like that too, makes you feel so much less
Yeah,
lonely.
absolutely.
Um,
It's
and I
so
think,
important.
yeah, I think for me, because I did put something out when we lost my nan, and I wasn't sure about it, but I show up a lot on my socials, and a bit like you, I'm not sure people be like, oh my God, where's she gone? But also I knew at the point that I came back, where I am generally quite high energy, high vibe, all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't necessarily be like that. And
No.
it felt really inauthentic to me to go on. I knew that I still wanted to show up and do stuff and all that kind of stuff, but it felt a bit unauthentic to to go on but not kind of explain what was going on in the background. And it wasn't
Mhm.
like a feel sorry for me or anything like that, but also I was going to a big event the following week, and I almost wanted people to know, because I didn't want to have to say something, because I knew I'd be okay if people knew. But I think it's as well, I did a live about this the other day, but it is as well about giving yourself permission. There's marketing advice that you can give around that, and there's social media advice you can give around that, but it's giving yourself permission to just do what's right for you. So
Mhm.
if it makes you feel a bit more comfortable sharing it, like I said, for me it wasn't authentic to go on and look like I'd been crying and whatever, and that's not authentic for me. I wouldn't go on like that. But
No.
just putting a post on going, do you know what, I might be a bit quieter because I've got this going on helped. But also, if you don't want to put anything out there, that's fine too. And I think again, it's that, like, I guess if anybody listening takes anything from this, it's the permission to do just what feels best for you, because
Yeah,
there isn't a right or wrong answer.
exactly. Yeah.
And if you do go quiet for a while, if you do decide you're not sharing anything, you just don't go on, there's ways that you can come back and you can deal with that later and you can address that later.
Yeah.
It is, it's what suits you, isn't it?
Well, that's it. And I think I did a post that was like, I'm going to be off for a bit
Yeah.
afterwards, after the funeral and stuff. And I have a lot of my freelance pals have become real pals. So I didn't want to not be on Instagram or be using my
Yeah.
phone or anything, because
Yeah.
actually a lot of the people who gave me comforting words and advice and stuff in that, when you're in the real trenches of it, were freelancers, people who were running their own businesses, who really understood where I was at. And I wanted to sort of be there but not be there, and take my own space and time as I needed it, really. And it, I don't know if on reflection I would have shared as much, maybe, but I think it was what I needed to get it out at the time, like that release of like saying it out loud or typing it out or whatever. Makes it so much more real.
Yeah. And it was right for you in the moment. So whether you know that you've got to do what's right for you in the moment, isn't it? And things can always be taken down or deleted, or stories only last so long. Like there's no,
That's it.
And like we said, like obviously talking about something like losing your mum, which is huge. But even if it is like, just if you're struggling to deal with anything, like lots of this advice is applicable, isn't it? Like, and not well, and the or the sort of message going throughout is just to be kind to yourself and do what's right for you. Because there are things, like I said, like business advice and marketing advice and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, if you're doing things because you feel like you should do it, you're going to struggle, aren't you? So
and it's not true to who you are, is it? If you're just doing it because you think that's what you should do. Ultimately, you have a business and people come to you because they believe in what you offer and they trust you. And a part of that, I think, is being authentic, I suppose. And I often feel like you can see through people that are showing who they are, and regardless of like the situation, I think it's always best to just be yourself.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because the word authentic has become such a buzzword, but I think there's become a misunderstanding around what authentic actually means, and people think that authentic means you have to share everything, and it's like, well, no. If you're the kind of person that shares a lot, which I am, and I know you are, then it's authentic to you to share that stuff. If you're not the kind of person that naturally does that, then it's quite inauthentic to go on and do that. So the only person that can answer what the best thing to do is you, isn't it? So
exactly.
Honestly, Lucy, thank you so much. I'm conscious of the time because I could talk to you all day, and I think this is such an important thing to sort of normalize and talk about. So I want to say thank you so much for being so vulnerable with it as well, because it is hard to talk about, isn't it? But I think people will take a lot from it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, it is a hard thing to talk about, but I'm just glad that I get the chance to talk about it and that I get to share all these things.
That's one of the things I see a lot in the stuff that's said around grief is like, no, actually say their name. I want to talk about them. Like, and I might get upset, but that's okay. It's not a bad thing.
Exactly.
So I love that. Can I ask, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit through what you were saying, but I guess probably more generally than when you're sort of dealing with difficult things. But this is just something I like to ask everybody who comes on. What things help you to show up in your business, and what tips would you give someone else to do the same? So not necessarily when you're dealing with really difficult things, but just in general as a business owner, what things help you and what tips would you give to somebody?
Gosh, do you know what? Even though did I answer this last time? Because I actually don't remember what I said.
I don't know because I haven't got the recording, so I can't even check. I can get my response to it.
Yeah, you go,
Yeah.
absolutely no idea what I would have said. I think the things that do help me show up are paid for childcare. That definitely
Yes.
helps. Where I live, we don't have family near us, so that's how we
Yeah.
live our lives, is with preschool. I use Trello, and lovely Caitlin from my team supports me with some of my social media content. What else would I say?
I think both those work though, because Trello. So I guess it's about being organised, isn't it? And
Yeah.
not feeling guilty that because I sometimes, even though my children are both in school now, like actually it's okay to work at a time when you could have them. Or show up at go to networking events or conferences or things like that. So I love that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, it's making the time, isn't it? And putting it in,
yeah, yeah,
in a way that works for you and your family.
yeah,
My husband is self-employed, so we have to make it work between
yeah,
us. And I think, if anything, it does give us that greater flexibility.
yeah,
You know, when Mum died, I could take time off, and he could take
yeah,
time off to have ED,
yeah,
or he could swap his shifts around so that
yeah,
he was here and when I couldn't be, and things like that. So
yeah,
I think the flex is just the
yes.
thing that allows you to do it, isn't it?
Amazing. And is there again, you've touched on it, so if there's nothing to add, don't feel you need to add anything. But is there any advice you'd go back and give yourself in the early days of running your business that you've sort of learned since? What would be your
Yeah.
piece of advice to Lucy of a few years ago?
Well, I mean, this is my thing that I say all the time, right? But it's shy burns getting out. So don't ask, don't get is basically what it means. And it's just that thing. I think at the beginning,
Yeah,
like with asking Holly, um, if I hadn't asked her, then I might not be doing this right now. If I hadn't
yeah,
chatted to Steve at Being Freelance, then I might not have, being freelance. I might not work with
yeah,
however many clients or whatever. So I think for me, that's been a really valuable thing, is just putting myself out there. Even if it feels super scary, just doing it.
yeah. I
Thinking
love
about the
that because
consequences.
that is like that's literally life advice to live by, isn't it? Like if you want something, ask for it because the worst that's going to happen is someone says no or it doesn't work out and you try something else.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's just really, no one is going to think anything negatively of you for just giving it a go.
Yes, absolutely, and I feel like that's the perfect place to finish on. So that's amazing. But before we go, finally, where can people come and find you, and find connect with you and all that kind of stuff?
You can probably find me the most on Instagram. It's Untold.Creative. Why do I not
It
remember
is
what it is?
Untold.Creative because I
Thank
noticed that the
you.
other day.
I'm really glad someone knows, because I honestly don't. And then my website is untold-creative.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn as Lucy Critchley.
Amazing, and I will put all the links to all those things into the show notes so that you can go across and connect with Lucy. And I really recommend you do because I said on my
Oh,
stories this morning and I meant it. She is a fantastic business owner, but an even more wonderful human being. So
what, you're
yeah,
going to
go
set me off
across.
again? Thank you.
I just feel like if I could make you cry just at the end, then
Oh, I've cried throughout, Becky.
no, honestly, it's been absolutely brilliant. Do please go find Lucy because she is brilliant. And thank you so, so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for listening to Show Up and Be Heard. But please don't go without telling me your name. I genuinely love meeting new people and making new connections. So if you don't already, I'd love it if you'd come find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook and drop me a message to say hello and let me know what you thought of the episode. The link to all my socials are in the show notes. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode or found it useful, then I'd really appreciate it if you could take just a few minutes to give it a review on whatever platform you are listening on, because everyone I get really does make me do a little squeal and a big happy dance. Finally, more than anything else, please always remember, realizing that you're not actually meant to do this stuff alone is the first step to making it easier. So I'll see you next time.